After this video, you're going to know exactly how to write a grade 9 paragraph, especially for a Christmas Carol. We are going to be going through the grade 9 structure that you need to get the top marks on your English literature essays, and we're going to be going through a model example so you can compare it with your actual essays and see how you can improve, and most importantly, see how we use this structure. Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm the Lightup Tutor, and this is the Lightup Hub, the only channel you need for GCSE English. Everything we're going to go through today is going to be directly coming from the Lightup Hub, which we teach you all of the things that we go through on this YouTube channel. Grade 9 analysis, key quotes, structures, context sheets, grade 9 essays, all of that is on the Lightup Hub. You can get the free lessons in the description. But let's get started for this video today. So get your pen, get relaxed, and let's start revising. Okay, so we're gonna be going through the structure you need for a grade 9. We've gone through it before on this channel, but I'm gonna hammer it home to make sure every single one of you is using it. So the structure is peta, eta, qual. Let's just quickly run through what they mean again. We've got P is for point, E is for evidence, T is for technique, A is for analysis, then the eta again is another evidence, technique, analysis. Then the C is context, the W is writer's intentions, and the L is link. Today we're going through a grade 9 model example for peta, eta, qual, showing you all the top tips for what you need to do for each bit to write a top level response. So the question we're going to look at today is for a Christmas Carol, and it is how is Scrooge presented as an isolated character? So remember, we're going to go through our peta, eta, qual structure. We're going to do our point first. So my point, Scrooge is presented as successful in his ostracization and isolation from society, as he appears to be unaffected by the weather, people, and human sentiment. Now, you'll be able to see on the screen, I've highlighted the word isolated because that is what we're going to constantly be linking it back to. So you can see in my point already, I've given my point, which is about his successful ostracization, basically he successfully isolated himself. And I've used the word from the question, which is isolated, or a variation, isolated, isolation. You will constantly be using that, and we're going to bold it in every single time we do it. You should be really referencing it back. Okay, so we've done our point now, really clear point, something I'm going to constantly be referring back to. Now let's look at our evidence. Scrooge's successful attempts at being isolated and willingly ostracizing himself is clear as external heat and cold had little influence on him. So here, when I'm putting in my evidence, you can see I didn't say this is shown by the quote. I embedded it in. And not only did I embed it in, I linked it back to the word from the question, which of course is isolation, and my point about him willingly ostracizing himself. So you can see how I've just weaved that back in and then put it into a sentence to embed my quote in. Let's do our technique and analysis now. Dickens uses the conceit of the relentless cold here and in Frosty Rhyme to illuminate how Scrooge's internal apathy and yearning for isolation is so omnipotent, all-powerful, that it even affects how nature interacts with him. The isolating bubble he has cast around himself is so strong, even nature's natural processes are prohibited from affecting him. So there is quite a lot of high-level vocabulary in there, so don't worry if you don't understand everything too much. Just so you know, omnipotence means all-powerful. His apathetic nature just basically means he's very cold, very unbothered by people. And a conceit is an extended metaphor. So a metaphor you do throughout the entirety of a bit of text. So you don't just do it once, you do it multiple times. So you can see here, in this analysis, I've really gone into depth. I've used the word isolation again, constantly linking it back to it. I've gone back to my point, which is about him being willingly ostracized, because I've explained how his nature is literally affecting the way that he looks and the way that he's been presented, because it is so powerful. And also remember, guys, a bit of a top tip, if you really struggle with analysis and struggle to expand, make sure you're using the word as and because then it forces you to have to explain. Because you have to say Scrooge is presented as isolated because, and then you give your reason. It just forces you to have to explain. Okay, let's go on to our second bit of analysis, because remember, peta, eta, this is the second E, the second bit of evidence. Moreover, Scrooge's isolation is clear through his willing ostracization, as he is constantly warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Again, you can see my evidence, I've embedded it in, and I've also linked it back to my point, willingly ostracizing, and the word from the question, which is isolation. Okay, now let's do our second technique and analysis for this quote. The diction warning has connotations of danger. Diction's just word choice. This could be illustrative of how Scrooge sees human sympathy and interaction as a danger to his solemn and isolated existence. He would rather willingly ostracize and isolate himself from society than have to face and deal with human emotion, as he is emotionally conservative. So again there, I've given another technique and analysis. I've linked it back to willingly ostracized, because that's my point. I've linked it back to isolated. And I've just gone that bit further as well. When I said about the word warning connoting danger, I've linked that into my analysis and said how he feels it is a danger to him. So that's a really nice way you can link things. Whenever you're talking about the effect of a technique, like for example, connotations, it being a danger, see if you can use that word in your analysis as well. And what I mean by emotionally conservative is he puts up a bit of a barrier. He isn't very open-minded and doesn't interact with people with an open heart. Okay, so we've done our peta eta. Now for our cooler part. So the C represents context. So let's look at how we put in our context. The first bit I'm going to give you in terms of the sentence is a link to the context. Then we're going to put the context in. So my link to context, Scrooge's isolated presentation in stave 1 is salient as he is microcosmic. So microcosm, when something small represents something larger, for the misanthropic upper classes who neglect their responsibility as moral citizens in society by isolating themselves. Now, this is the actual bit of context I'm going to put in. I just had to put a link so it flowed in the paragraph. Dickens would have had extreme distaste for this attitude of the upper classes' ignorant isolation, as he grew up in poverty, experiencing the dehumanizing workhouses, and thus had empathy for the poor. So you can see with my link to context, I'm kind of making a link between the analysis and the context I'm about to put in, so it's not just bolted on. Because what a lot of students don't do well is they'll just put context in, or they'll write loads of context in. Remember, this isn't a history essay, and it won't flow well in the paragraph. So just having a link to context, imagine it's like a chain. It's linking the analysis to the context. It has to have that bit in the middle to almost link them together, otherwise it just doesn't flow as nicely. So I've linked Scrooge to the wider idea and then tied it into the context about Dickens working in the workhouses. Now it's for my writer's intentions, and again, notice as I read this out how I've kind of linked my context to my writer's intentions, so it all links really, really nicely. Thus, due to Dickens' empathetic stance towards the poor, see, look how I've linked it to my context, he crafts Scrooge as the archetype of a misanthropic upper class member to highlight the detrimental consequences of the upper class's willing isolation. He illustrates from the beginning that the selfish isolation and willing ostracization of them from society is inextricably linked to the suffering of the lower classes. So I've linked back what I've been talking about through this whole paragraph. I've been speaking about Scrooge willingly ostracizing himself and why he's presented as isolated, and what Dickens' purpose for doing that is. Why is Dickens presented Scrooge as isolated? So my interpretation of how I've linked it is he is trying to show that when upper class members like Scrooge isolate themselves from society and are being really selfish, this actually links to a harmful effect on the poor, the detrimental, which is like the negative effects on the poor. And that's how I've linked it all together. So you can see throughout that whole paragraph, just even towards my writer's intentions, I've constantly linked it back to willingly ostracized, because that's my point. And I've constantly linked it back to the word from the question, because that is so important that you must do that. Now, the last thing of our peta eta call is link. We're now gonna link it all together in one final sentence. Therefore, Dickens is scathing of the willing ostracization of the upper classes and presents Scrooge as an isolated character through methods like the conceit of the cold to achieve this. So imagine your link sentence is just the summary sentence. Almost like if you were gonna encapsulate your whole paragraph in one sentence, what would it be? That is my link. Now, let's just go through, as a bit of a summary, what has been done well in this paragraph. Number 1, I have used the word from the question 13 times. 13 times throughout that whole paragraph, I have used the word isolated. So the examiner or my teacher cannot mark me down for not linking it back to the question, which the majority of you will get marked down at some point for not really clearly answering the question. The easiest way to do that is use the word from the question. Number 2, I have linked everything back to my point. My point in this was that he willingly ostracizes himself. So everything I'm linking back to willingly ostracized, and then of course the word from the question. And number 3, everything is linked really nicely together. So of course it's linked well because I've used the word from the question and my point, but also everything flows onto the next. So specifically towards the second half of the paragraph, what the majority of students tend to do is they'll bolt on their context, their writer's intentions won't really link to what they've been speaking about, and that's what really brings a lot of students' grades down. Because most of you know how to analyse, albeit it might not be like the highest grade 9 analysis, but you don't actually understand how to write a really cohesive essay. So that is what you want to make sure. Like I did, I had a link to my context. Then after that, I had a link to my writer's intentions. And then my link at the end linked it all together. Link. So think about how you can make sure you're linking everything together so it's a really seamless essay. So that was a grade 9 essay for A Christmas Carol. Comment below if you want to see any more grade 9 paragraphs or grade 9 essays. But of course, if you want to learn this in way more detail than I'll ever be able to cover on the YouTube videos, go check out the Lightup Hub. The link's in the description. And make sure you subscribe to this channel because we're putting out videos every single week, and the more subscribers we get on here, the more it helps this channel. So have the best day, guys. Make sure to subscribe and check out the lessons in the description, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.